Well guys, there's a lot of tactics, there's a lot of strategies that you could be using in order to get on your target deer. It's November, it's pre-rut, it's post-rut, it's the rut. This is a whole time of the year where you can really vocalize with deer and have a better chance of bringing those deer in. A lot of times I don't necessarily love doing it other portions of the year. Deer are just way more aggressive, they're communicating more this time of year, they're letting out their aggression, they're doing all these different things, and at the end of the day, they're vocalizing more. So how can you vocalize more like a deer and sound more natural? What are the best ways that you can vocalize with those deer or communicate with those deer? We're gonna go over those today. So let's go over the typical grunt. Everybody knows the grunt. So when should you be grunting? Now, me personally, I'm not a big fan of blind grunting or blind calling most times, depending on location, where I am, how the pressure is, things of that nature. But grunting for bucks this time of year can absolutely work. So to give you a scenario in which a time I would absolutely grunt at a buck, you got a buck within the vicinity, okay? You got that buck within 100, 200 yards, maybe less, maybe more. And you're trying to get his attention. He's not gonna come to you, he's not taking a trail towards you. You need to get him closer to you. And that's one thing, if this deer is already naturally moving towards you guys, stay away from calling. You're better off never letting that deer know you're there until the moment of truth, when you pull back and kill him. So you gotta call this deer in. Okay, the number one thing that I would really focus on if you're trying to call a deer into you is making sure that he can't see in your direction. If he can see in your direction and you grunt at him and you say, hey, I'm over here, buddy, come check it out. We got some does over here. If he can see over there and he doesn't see anything, he's gonna be suspicious. If you're dealing with more mature deer, a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old deer, they've been called that before. They know this game. So at least if you choose to grunt at a deer and use these different sorts of vocalizations through a grunt tube, if he can't see you, he's gonna be a lot more likely to come and check out the scenario. A lot more curious. As simple as that. If he can't see you, he doesn't know what's going on, he's gotta come check it out. And if he's a dominant deer, he's probably gonna say to himself, hey, who's in my area? Who's messing with my does? I gotta go check that out. So that is one of the top ways that I do use grunting during the whole November time frame. Like I said, I don't love blind grunting because sometimes, especially a smarter deer and a more mature deer, a deer that's dealt with pressure, will circle downwind of you when you grunt. You don't even know he's there, and you probably never will, because he'll circle downwind of you if he's smart, if he's been pressured, and he's gonna, he's gonna scent check you, and he's gonna say, yeah, that's not a deer. It smells like a human to me. And you can't beat a whitetail's nose. I don't care what anybody says. Maybe there's a couple things you can do to minimize scent and this and that, but you're not gonna beat his nose. So putting myself in that scenario where I'm blind calling at deer, it can work. Sometimes those deer don't have the patience to go downwind and they just want to know what's going on right now. Like I said, maybe they can't see you and they could come in. It can work, but it's something I stay away from. I like to call it deer when they're walking away and they're not going to come towards me. I can put the puzzle piece together and see the scenario unfolding and ultimately make the right call by grunting at the right or wrong time. So that's how I'm generally grunting or using my grunt tube in November. Number 2, rattling. Now this one is kind of similar in a way that I'm gonna be using this tactic a lot more in long range scenarios. Maybe I see a deer way across the field, 300-400 yards. He can't see in my direction once again. He can't physically see bucks fighting. I'm banging those horns together to get him to come check it out. These mature deer, these aggressive deer, it doesn't always matter that they're mature, but these aggressive deer are gonna be interested in that. They're gonna wanna come check it out. Learn your deer. I had a deer last year who, he was just a normal deer. He wasn't overly aggressive, but he wasn't kind of a wuss either. But he got in a fight with a younger deer and he gouged his eye almost right out. From that time on, no sort of calling worked with this deer. So, and he was a 150-inch deer, mid-150s deer. He just wanted nothing to do with it. So rattling at this deer sent him out of the county. He wasn't coming back. So keep that in mind if you do know that or know the deer that you're hunting. Rattling sometimes might not be the most ideal calling method because those bucks don't like getting beat up, and if they've gotten beat up before, let's face it, they don't want to go run to the next fight, most likely. So that's how I'm using rattling for the most part. I'm not going to lie to you. There are instances in which I will blind rattle, but it depends where I'm hunting. If I'm hunting states like Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, places with lower pressure where these bucks hear it more often, in a natural setting, I'll blind call. I'll blind rattle. Maybe I'll even use that grunt tube like I talked about. Why? Because these deer are used to hearing it. So they're gonna come right in, hopefully. In a pressured area, let's say you're hunting Wisconsin, Michigan, PA, parts of Ohio, those deer have heard it before, they're gonna get downwind, double check, then come in. Any higher pressure area, that's a lot more likely. Lower pressure area, that deer's like, oh, that's Bobby over there in the corner and he's fighting Billy, so we better go check it out, and not think twice about it. So those are all times in which I would definitely think about rattling. And like I said, it's time dependent, it's place dependent. So use rattling sparingly, I guess, but at the same time, use it because it can work. Number 3, the old snort wheeze. For you, those of you that are unfamiliar with the snort wheeze is the, hey buddy, get your butt out of my neck of the woods. These are my does. I'm gonna beat you up if you don't get out of here. Well, the snort wheeze, once again, like rattling, can scare off deer or it can bring them in running. And I like using the snort wheeze kind of as a last resort, if I had to be honest with you. I'll use the grunt, something that's a little bit more subtle, because when you snort wheeze, a deer is gonna snap his head and he's gonna look and he wants to know what's going on and he's gonna make one of two decisions. He's coming for you or he's going the opposite direction. So it can catch him off guard. It's one of those times where I'm grunting at him maybe and he can't hear me, he can't hear me, he can't hear me. Well, I'm throwing out that snort wheeze and at least I can get him to snap his head, turn around, and know that there's something in my direction and he should come check it out, or maybe he won't. So it's not a top priority thing. It's not one of my top favorite things to do, but at the same time, you've got to keep it in your arsenal. You got to understand how to do it. And it can work. And those aggressive deer, once again, kind of like rattling, they're going to say, hey, who's in my neck of the woods? I'm coming over to check it out, and most likely kick their butt. So I do use the snort wheeze from time to time, and that's generally the scenario in which I'll use the snort wheeze. Bleeding. Bleeding is something I honestly almost never use. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I've seen videos of it working. I know people who use it. They'll use the old bleat can, and you know, it's just basically signifying that there's a doe in the area who may or may not be an estrus. If you get those cruising bucks, you know, come the early part of November that are looking for a doe to breed, or maybe they're on their second round in mid-November or even third round in late November. Heck, this could work in December even. Being a less aggressive strategy or tactic, you know, when those younger fawns come into estrus in December. So using that bleat might grab a buck's curiosity if he's looking to breed. So, you know, there's a chance that could bring him in as well. Once again, not something I'm generally using, but I know it has worked for a lot of people. So use the bleat sparingly, know when to use it. That's the time that I would think about using it. The last one that I want to talk about is probably the most important, and you can and should implement this sequence or this vocalization or this noise with all these calls. Realistic leaf ruffling, scraping of trees, and rubbing of trees, things like that. Mimic that noise. I think it happens much more often where these bucks, maybe they only hear the grunt and they don't hear any walking. They don't hear any leaves crunching, and they kind of think, this reminds me of a different time when I heard this and I looked up in a tree and there was this big blob and he was moving around. At least if they can hear something, if you can reach to a branch from your tree, or if you're on the ground, make some sort of noise. Mimic the sound of a buck making a scrape, pawing at a scrape while you call. At least now that gives that deer a little bit more confidence that, oh, okay, there's something over there. And normally when I hear people calling, especially in high pressured areas, I don't necessarily hear that. This is something I hear in the dead of night when there's nobody out here, and you know, this sounds like one of my buddies is over there working a scrape. It's a lot more likely that deer is going to probably come in. I don't know, I can't give you an exact percentage, but I feel a lot more confident when I'm using those types of noises with my grunt tube or with my rattling antlers. That I feel a lot more confident those deer are going to actually come in. Same thing goes for, like I said, the noise that you hear when they're raking a tree. You know, whether it's working that scrape or making a rub. Use those different noises in combination with the grunts. Maybe the bleats, but not so much more so the grunts, I would say. The grunts, the rattling, things like that. If you're rattling, ruffle the leaves like like you would hear if two bucks were actually fighting. Make it, ultimately, you just want to make all these calls sound as realistic as you possibly can, so that these bucks think that there's actually a buck there or another deer there that they have to come investigate. At the end of the day, the last tactic or the last calling strategy is the most important to me. I'm using it with almost every single one because it makes the scenario way more realistic. So whether it's early November, late November, anywhere in between, you can use a lot of these different calling sequences, calling strategies, guys. But I think the most important part is really making sure that you're making those noises that are natural in the deer woods. So give those calls a try. Maybe they bring you in a trophy buck.